Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hi, Laquita. I'm
Hi.
Nicholas Pahn, and I am the Artistic Director of Collaborative Arts Institute of Chicago, and welcome to Heard Over the Piano. Thanks for being here. Thank you, Laquita, for being here. I'm so excited about our panel today. It's Laquita Mitchell, as you can see already, and Karim Sulayman, who is our surprise guest this evening,
Yeah,
and who
sorry.
is no, it's great. And who's actually going to be featured in our very next Leader Lounge in a couple weeks. And actually, Kareem is going to be back on this show in a couple weeks after Thanksgiving as well to chat more about his program. But tonight, we are going to chat about the subject of singers of color, non white singers, and our relationships with art song and the vocal recital and leader and all of this repertoire. I I've been thinking a lot over the past couple years about sort of how song is an expression of identity. I've actually been thinking about it probably for the last 17 years or so because I had this experience. Laquita probably remembers this. Maybe you do too, Kareem. I'm not sure, but I got to be Miss America at Miss Universe, right?
Can't wait to find out.
I got to be Miss America at Miss Universe. I got to go and represent the United States at the BBC Cardiff Singer of the World competition like forever ago. And one of the directives they gave us was bring songs of your country for the song round. And for me, I found that to be a really stymieing proposition because basically I didn't feel American enough to bring, something like At the River or Shenandoah or, Simple Gifts to the competition. So I ended up choosing something like really artsy and kind of very mixed. It was a setting of Langston Hughes by John Musto and a couple other sort of high art American songs. And it it's kind of stuck with me because I thought it was a really jarring experience. And so I've been thinking about it ever since. And then earlier this year, I had the honor of curating this project in Philadelphia called Emerging Voices, where we explored this idea of song as an expression of identity. And so after that, when you combine all of the insanity that has happened in 2020, particularly all of the murder of George Floyd, the murder of Breonna Taylor, and sort of this like racial reckoning that we've all been having because we're not doing anything but staring at our computer screens and we're being forced to digest what is happening in the world around us and in our country. It keeps coming back up to the fore, especially as classical music and the opera world keep wanting to engage with this conversation over the course of the last 6 months or so. And I feel like when it comes to song, there's. I read this phrase in an article the other day, which was classical music, like whiteness itself, is frequently racially unmarked and presented as universal until people of color start performing it. That's in an article by Kira Thurman, who is a professor at the University of Michigan. And when you take that and you add song to that equation, this idea that this thing that I think the three of us find universal on its surface, because obviously we are all drawn to it, this repertoire, it it's extra difficult because you're forced to contend with the sort of specific nature of language and what language means and culture and how culture manifests itself through language and how nationality and race manifest themselves through language. And so I'm so grateful that the two of you are here to kind of begin diving into this topic in a conversation format with me on this tonight. And let's just start with your experiences. What are your experiences with art song and recital repertoire and German lieder, and you know how has it impacted your career? How has it impacted your artistry? And do you feel? I mean, am I alone in feeling some of the weirdness about these things? Or
I wouldn't say you're alone. Um, I mean, everything that you said resonates with me. What I would say to try to put a more positive spin on it, not that that's necessarily our job, because I do think it's really important to talk about the fact that things don't always feel equal and all of that. And I certainly feel that. I have felt that through my career as well. But what I would say is that in the idea that things are universal, I mean, three people like us, we're all drawn to these similar things. And we train in a way that, especially us, that we want our languages to be good, and we want to express these things as best as we can as individuals. I think that song gives us the opportunity to do that, to be as individual as we are, and not to homogenize into like an operatic sound or, you know, an operatic role that people expect you to play a certain way. That song gives you the opportunity to be that individual. And I think, like, when you think about Schubert and Schubertiades and stuff like that, those were for the people. Those were for amateurs. They were for professionals. They were for all kinds of singers, and musicians. And so I think of things in that way. Like, what better way to express oneself than to take that music off the page and give oneself to it, right? And to think about these songs as being for everybody, and for each person as an interpreter, and for each person as a listener. And think that that's the way that I've sort of been able to tune out the other stuff, the stuff that had made me feel, I don't let it make me feel that way anymore, but that had made me feel like this was not my music, or that I did not belong, or that, you know, because what I think would be interesting also to explore, and I'll shut up right after I say this, is that voices of people of color also sound different, and people from different regions have different sounds. And I think that that's a real thing. There is an Asian sound, there is a Black sound, there is a Middle Eastern sound. And I think that song has afforded me a way to like explore my sound and what's individual about my sound in a way that has been really rewarding. So that's what I'll say about that.
Ooh, there's so much stuff I want to come back to there, but
I know.
LAQUITA, I'm so curious about your thoughts.
I don't know. I think this can go a plethora of ways. But I think the first time I ever sang songs that were not in my native language, I was in high school. And I sang like Heiden Roslein. And I was like, what is this? And I was in a class, New York City kids who were making fun of all of the words and playing around and like doing hip hop scene dances to the song and stuff like that. And I thought it was pretty, you know, funny. And then it wasn't until I went to college, where at Westminster Choir College, where we really took art song incredibly seriously. Dalton Baldwin on staff there, and Glenn Parker there, and you know, you go into an art song class given by Dalton Baldwin, and it would be on French or something like that, and there needed to be complete quiet within our hall when he began to play. And it was just such this highly sort of like high art form. And I sort of already thought, what was I doing in this space anyway? And to hear some of my colleagues sing this music, I thought to myself, okay, I know this music, I've heard it before. How do I fit in? And in certain instances, I didn't really feel like I did. I really didn't, until I was in a class and I was singing a spiritual, and the pianist said, you know, this is exactly Andi Musik. This is exactly the same feeling. This is exactly how the voice should sound when you're singing that. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, all these years I've been singing Andi Musik and I never really thought about it that way. And now when I sing the words Du Holde Kunst, I feel such elation, because I understand I've made that music, which is theirs, their language, I should say. I've formulated it into my own language. And I think that's the power of wanting to be a musician, and that's the power of wanting to communicate, to be a great communicator, because I've seen many singers sing, but I have not seen many people communicate. And I believe that if we can turn that thing around, and make it a part of who we are, or a part of our language, in this sort of insane, sort of abstract way, then it makes more sense to us. And then when it makes more sense to us, it makes more sense to the listener.
Interesting. That's what a great story about like how to relate one thing that seems so different to another thing and actually finding out that they're kind of the same at their core.
Absolutely.
Which putting a positive spin on it, sort of back to what Karim was talking about a second ago, you know, that's what I find so positive about song, right? Like, this is the ways in which I believe it can be for everybody, is that, you know, it's something in which we all find a place to connect to something that might be completely foreign or completely different.
Yeah.
And so it's reading this article that I pulled that quote from at the beginning. It was really interesting to me to read how, like, just the history of specifically Black singers in Europe, Black American singers in Europe, performing recitals about 100 years ago and in the last century. And she specifically focuses on the story of the tenor Roland Hayes, who started. He was one of the first. I think he might have been the first Black singer to sing a recital in Austria and in Germany in the 20s. And you know, and then Marian Anderson is the other person that she focuses on, who came a couple, like maybe a decade later after him. And there's this thing for the audiences there that she's describing, and the way she does her research is she looks at it through sort of the critics' responses to hearing and seeing these Black singers sing in flawless German with deep understanding of the poetry and the music and what it means. And you know, it was really jarring for them. And if you think about it, coming out of historically at that time, national identity was particularly important, specifically to the Germans, right? Because Germany was sort of a new-ish state, sort of this newish idea of a pan-German thing that probably like was really coming into fruition right up until World War I. And then after World War I, you know, it's still sort of grappling with what it is, because, you know, they lost their Kaiser, et cetera, et cetera. And they had to, you know, they were forming various governments. And this idea of, you know, what is Czech, what is German, what is French, and what is Czech music, and what is German music, and what is French music, these listeners were really forced to contend with this idea that Germanness is not something that is passed down through blood or by birth, but actually Germanness is something that can be learned. That's what these singers demonstrated. And there's a lot of power in that.
Nationalists would really disagree with that.
What's that?
Yes. And you know, they still do, right? Yeah. I mean, we all encounter this.
The conversations that we're having in this nation now, you have like a whole slew of our population that says America is one thing and one thing only, right? So it's like, I think like through history, we've contended with that idea of nationalism and what is a nationality as opposed to like an ethnicity, as opposed to an idea, right?
Right.
And a history and an identity and all of that stuff. It's a very complicated question. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I just
No, I'm so glad you did. And I mean, that's exactly, it's really complicated, right? I mean, and this is the thing that to me song represents at its core, particularly when you're talking about folk songs. But you know, Germans consider all Lieder to be like some of their highest national art form. I mean,
yeah.
That's true.
So something like LAQUITA singing "Du Holde," I mean, "An die Musik," and then to be able to connect to it like that, I mean, it's powerful. Yeah. So, speaking of listeners, and I want to go back to what Karim said. So you said that you feel that there are sounds like that are like racial sounds.
I do.
Because it's interesting. I'm beginning to really wonder about that. And it's a question that I'm really asking myself right now. And it's because it's funny. Like you listen to NPR and you're like, oh, I'm listening to a Black woman right now, or oh, I'm listening to a white gay man. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
But I also wonder how much of that is racialized in our ears as listeners, as opposed to the biology.
Very possible. Very possible. I could be a racist listener. Who knows? But I mean, I like um, yeah, maybe, I don't know. Maybe it's how I've listened and how I've come to learn about certain singers that, but I mean, I would say that like, you know, I mean, I hear a similarity in, well, I don't want to sound racist when I say this, you know, but like I hear a similarity in like in Leontine Price's sound, the core sound to LAQUITA's sound. And I guess maybe I've equated that to a Black sound, but maybe that's wrong of me to do. But
I don't know. I mean, it's a question. I'm literally at this. That's like the context of the year. This year has me asking myself those questions. Do you have thoughts on that, Laquita?
Yeah, I in the beginning, I used to say, "Oh well, I can tell. I can tell what ethnicity that singer is." Oh, but then later on comes, let's say, a Pretty Yende. You close your eyes, you wouldn't be able to tell what who that person is, or obviously, I think it's, in my opinion, I think it's a little bit more pronounced in the male voice, not right now, especially the baritones and the lower voices for me. I can sort of tell. And I don't know what that's about, but I can just tell. But for sopranos and for higher voices, right now, that's a bit skirred and blurred for me. And before I thought I knew, but I think it's blurred for me. And I think that that's a good thing. I think that it is really important that we find our own identity and that we find our own sound and have
whatever that is.
Whatever that is, whatever that might be, it might be a sound like Barbara Bonney. It might be a Barbara Hendricks. It might be a Don Upshaw. It might be, Edita Gruberova, whatever the case may be. Let it be what it's going to be. And I don't want my sound to be determined as a Black sound, because I don't necessarily think I mean, maybe I do. I don't know. I hate listening to myself. So, that. But I mean, like, you just don't know. You have no idea what ethnicity the person is. Nowadays, I wouldn't be able to tell.
So just by the way, to all of you watching on Facebook, please, if you have questions, shoot them in the comments, or if there's some sort of audio glitch or anything, like me knocking over a water bottle, please put those in the comments, and I'm monitoring those, and we'll pass those on to our panel here. And just, Laquita, Myra is watching, and she said that she loved your example of Andi Musik compared to the spiritual you were singing. She loved that example. So
yeah, oh,
wonderful. So for you both, speaking of finding our individual sounds, for me personally, singing songs has been a really big part of that. Yeah. There's something about the operatic repertoire where I find it too easy to kind of want to imitate sound or create colors or sounds, because there's a sonic expectation in my ear, because I've been listening to whoever sing whatever. But when it comes to songs, I don't know. That's been kind of key for me. Have you had that experience with you?
For sure. I mean, because I think what's so specific to song is also poetry, right? Not that there isn't poetry in opera librettos, but you have like mini operas in songs, right? You have an entire story being told in one song, like, right? So in taking that apart, your interpretation of that poem becomes yours, right? Nobody can tell you what a certain poem might mean to you. And so when you internalize that poem, what a certain image brings up for you, what a tree, what a Lindenbaum does. Now, granted, there's like, oh, am I gone?
No, you're here.
Oh, what happened?
Nothing.
I don't know. We didn't notice anything.
I cannot see you guys anymore. So I don't know what happened with my computer, but I'll keep talking. So yes, there's symbolism with a Lindenbaum, right? But like, but a Lindenbaum, a linden tree, also could invoke something very, very personal for the interpreter. And what that invokes then becomes part of how you read that poem and how you read then that song. And I feel like that's integral in finding your own voice and in finding, you know, finding how you, sorry, something is going on with my computer and it's really distracting me. So I hope I've just made sense, but I'm going to
You've
figure
made
it
total
out.
sense. You figure that out, and I'm going to validate what you're saying because
Okay.
it's interesting. I remember George Shirley talking once about
Back.
vocal color. Oh, hi, welcome back. Um, I remember him talking to it was me and I think one other student. I think we were coaching a duet recital or something with him, and in college. And I remember him talking about vocal color, and I remember him saying like, when people talk about vocal color, he's like, if you conjure the emotion and the image in your mind, the vocal color will produce itself.
Mm-hmm.
And like that's exactly to me what you're talking about. It's like once you find that for you, then obviously that's going to manifest for you. And that is why, like, Fischer Dieskau's
Mm.
On die Musik is going to sound completely different to LAQUITA's On die Musik. It's like
Yeah.
there
And I
there's
wish
that's
that
what
I wish that like our industry would embrace that more. Like you think, like people say, like there's only there has to be like a definitive interpretation of a Nandi Musik, and it has to be Fischer Dieskau's. But like for me, like I was saying at the beginning, the whole point of a Schubert song is that it's for everybody
That's
and
right.
for each person. And so I wish that I hope eventually we get away from there being definitive interpretations of songs,
Mm-hmm.
because I think like every interpretation should be a definitive interpretation of a song. But I feel like that's like the bigger conversation about like inclusion in general, and that people like us have as much to say as a German person about a German song, right?
Absolutely. I read some of the article that you sent by Ms. Thurman, and I think about the critics, and I think about a lot of the writings of the critics of a famous people of color who have sung before us, and I think about what they say, their criticisms about the singer, and it's like, first of all, let's think about the singers, especially late 1800s, 1900s. We have E.T. Greenfield, before there was Marian Anderson or Paul Robeson, before there was Roland Hayes. There were women who were not afforded the right to vote. There were women even before the Emancipation Proclamation who decided to work outside of the home. What type of audacity does it take for a woman to say, I'm going to go and I'm going to sing German music, French music, and opera, and I'm going to do it, and I'm going to, sing here and do this, and I'm going to make sure I find this money so that I can have these lessons, so that I can further my studies. There were a lot of women and a lot of men who did that before Marian Anderson and the others. So let's talk about the audacity that it takes for people in 1860s and 1900s to go out and to do things that we right now are able to do at a church easily. So Ciceretta Jones, we all know about her now. She's had this big reemergence, I should say. A wonderful article written about her in the New York Times about a year and a half ago. And Miss Norman dedicated one of her last concerts that I sang for Miss Norman was dedicated to Ciceretta Jones. It was called Call Her by Her Name. Miss Norman and Carolyn Blackwell curated this huge concert. And when you think about this woman who was being paid, I don't know, $150 a week, and then on to $2,000 a week, still not being paid as much as Adelina Patti, $4,000 a night. Pretty great for 1920s and 1930s, right? But when you think about these women who actually stood there and grounded themselves and said, yes, this music belongs to me too. It took something that, I mean, I don't even know what that's called, to do something like that during a
it's
time
called resolve.
that, you know what I mean? It's like unlike anything we've ever heard. And there were a lot of singers that emerged in that way. Roland Hayes came through the Fisk Jubilee Singers. There were tons of singers in the Jubilee Singers who went on to have solo careers. He happened to be one that his career just took a bit more meaning. But there was Saleka Williams and Nellie Brown Mitchell and, you know, Elizabeth Taylor Greenfield, whom I heard about a long time ago. And these are women who did something that was extraordinary. And when I hear what the critics say about them, it's of no consequence to me.
But it's interesting what the critics say about them, even the positive ones, right? Because like Ciceretta Jones becomes what? She becomes referred to as the Black Patti.
The Black Patti, yeah.
Yes, and like Roland Hayes becomes referred to as like the Black Caruso or the Black Steiner, who was like a leader singer, a Viennese leader singer, or German, I can't remember which. And Marian Anderson, I mean, there's a quote in this article that has a critic calling her the Negro singer with a white soul.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like, it's.
What the hell does that mean?
What does that even?
I know, and it's meant as a compliment, and it's like, it's so ridiculous.
You feel disgusting.
It's so crazy. Yeah.
We have a question from the Peanut Gallery here. It's how much do regional accents? Let me repeat this. How much do regional accents affect your operatic singing voice? Can you tell if someone's from Milwaukee or Texas or London when they're singing art song? Is there some kind of central accent that everybody's trying to imitate when they sing? I mean, this question actually I like because it gets to the heart of language, right? This is something that I notice when I'm singing in Germany, where the first test as a non-white and an American is your German good?
That's right.
And they're always so shocked when like I produce good German. It's, you know, I take it as a compliment. And I mean, obviously I'm not a native speaker, so I do receive the compliment with joy. And, but at the same time, it's, the question kind of gets to that. I mean, what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I feel like in good classical singing training, we are trained to execute languages according to the phonetic alphabet and according to what the rules are of those languages and singing in those languages. I mean, obviously there are accents, and obviously some people have better ear for languages than other people.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's regional or if it's just people's own ear for languages and their own ear for being able, if they can't speak the language, to be able to imitate the sounds of the language. So I don't know that American regional accents necessarily would dictate how one sings in a foreign language. I'm not sure about that. I'm like, because if you think about like Jennifer Larmore has a very thick Southern accent, but I don't necessarily hear that when she sings in French or in Italian. I hear really good French and Italian. So, you know, but I know some people who have thick regional accents who can't sing in those languages as much as they try. So,
do you think about it? I mean, I think about accents a lot with English, and actually it's one of the reasons, I mean, as much as I love singing in English, I find it to be kind of stressful sometimes because there are so many options, right? And so when I'm singing British music, like I'm doing my best Meryl Streep of whatever, you know, generic British accent I can fathom in my singing voice. But like, you know, in an American, like if you're singing a song from, you know, one of the John Jacob Niles songs from Appalachia, like, do you sing it in regular English? Like, or, I mean,
yeah.
do you affect a Southern Appalachian accent if that even exists? Which I think it's supposed to do. I mean, that's what you're supposed to sing in Susanna, right? Like, I think that's the generic. Yeah. So, I mean.
Yeah, I think it varies. I mean, no one wants to sing an English song in a crazy Brooklyn accent. That would be me, but because I'm from Brooklyn. But you certainly want to adhere to certain English diction rules. If you're singing the Messiah, you're certainly going to color the words and roll some of the R's maybe, or flip the R's or whatever. If you're singing, Now, African American art songs, which everyone is beginning to sing now, I try to pay essential detail to who the poet is, when he wrote it, what was the nature of what that meant. You know, if we're speaking about someone like Langston Hughes, obviously a lot of his prose, a lot of his writing was, you know, to sort of sorry, that's a New York heat banging behind me. And we need it because
We're
it's
just
like degrees.
we're just glad you're warm.
Thank you. So if you're singing prose by, you know, by Langston Hughes, obviously, you know, I'm singing this as an American, and I will color or blues some of the notes if it calls for it. But for the most part, I'm actually paying close attention to what the writer has asked, because I know the background of Langston Hughes, and I know, more importantly, that what African Americans and what people of that time wanted was for people to hear them. So I need you to hear what I am saying when I say I too sing America. I need you to understand what that means, because that poet wanted the audience, everyone, to read that poem and be taken in immediately. So that for me is important, what the poet is asking or wants us to give, I guess.
So I don't know if do you have Willis Patterson's anthology of African American art song?
Mm-hmm.
So there are some songs in there where, I mean, like, I think they might be Paul Laurence Dunbar poems, but they you know, they've got this sort of like slave dialect going on, and there's a note saying you don't have to sing in this dialect, you can sing in normal English. Yeah. But I mean, if you encounter a song like that, do you have thoughts on that? Or like, I mean, does Porgy kind of...
Yeah, Porgy sometimes, you know, Gershwin certainly, I mean, if you read the actual novella of Porgy, certainly it is written in Gullah. Certain passages are written in what's Gullah or Geechee dialect. And you try your best to adhere to that as much as vocally possible, as far as I'm concerned. I do not want to hear a Porgy and Bess in high British English. Like, I don't want to hear that. I would love to hear a certain words colored, and obviously I would like to hear certain phrases that come together that really get the audience, make the impact of the phrase, and the audience gets it immediately. You know, to say I loves you, Porgy, everyone knows that. You know, I love you, Porgy is another thing. You know, but to say I loves you, that means that's complete abandon. That means you're giving it all. You know, so yeah, you there's certain things that one needs to do in order to adhere to what the composer and librettist is asking. And I think that's important. And especially when you sing spirituals as well. I do think that there's a time and a place for everything, I think.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So who are some of your favorite non-white recitalists, like non-white art song leader singers?
Me?
History or now? Yeah, either of you.
Karim, you go.
I mean, Jessie Norman, she gave one of the best recitals I've ever seen in my entire life.
Yes.
Francisco Araiza sings Schubert so beautifully. I mean, I don't know. I mean, he's Mexican, right? I don't know how he identifies racially, but I thought when I've watched him sing Schubert recital, I've never seen it live, but watching him sing Schubert recitals have just been like, I mean, so good. And of course, I mean, I grew up listening to Barbara Hendricks sing songs, and I just love her, and I have such a spot in my heart and soul for her. So those are sort of my go-tos.
Yeah, I mean, I love, I had the opportunity to hear Grace Bunbury in one of her last recitals, in New York City. I was in school, and she called it Alita Abend, and leader it was. It was an hour and 15 minutes full of Schubert and Brahms and Wolf, and it was exquisite singing. It really, really was. And I also enjoyed, obviously, I love Miss Norman. There is, you know, to see her in her day, you know, sing these recitals, it's breathtaking. It's everything that you could possibly imagine an opera being, what just in each little song, you know. And so if you're fortunate enough to be in New York City, that time that she sang at Carnegie Hall, and each night was a different night of art song. It was just one of the most amazing things at New York. You know, if you were a real New Yorker and you had the opportunity to experience that, that's just fantastic. I love Barbara Hendricks as well. And oh, there's so many people that I can think of. Obviously, Miss Battle, I really enjoyed her recitals because they were all eclectic, and obviously her German singing is quite magnificent. So I enjoyed her as well. Yeah.
Yeah, Jessie Norman really, I think she's just one of the greatest leader singers out there, like in history ever to have lived.
So good.
Her Der Zwerg is like riveting. I
So
mean, she's
good.
just such a masterful storyteller, and she's so committed to the text, which is something I love about both of your singing, by the way. I love the way that you both just tell stories. It's
Yeah.
really great.
Isn't that what it's about? It's just
Yes.
about telling stories. Like,
Yeah.
he's a fantastic storyteller, especially if you get a couple of drinks in them. He's immensely great.
Who?
PHAN is a fantastic storyteller himself, but it is just I've spent so much time with these people. But isn't it about that? It's about telling the story. And what's so great about singers of color who have had to do these recitals because they were not allowed in the opera house, um, they told stories that sometimes the audience didn't think that they had within them. Like we're actually changing the thoughts of how people perceive us. And I know that that's what Miss Norman did. That's the reason why everyone is still flabbergasted by her recitals. You know what I mean? And that are on recording. Like, we're like, what is this? And for her, you know, the recital thing was because it was a preservation thing for the voice. For Ciceretta Jones, it was because she was not allowed to sing at the Metropolitan Opera House. For Marian Anderson, she was not allowed to sing at the Metropolitan Opera House until the ending of her career, where we didn't really get a chance to really hear the luster, the greatness of the instrument because she was on in age. But it didn't really matter. You know what I mean?
It's an astounding decision to me that she was not allowed, or she was not invited to sing at the Met
Yeah.
until something like 15 or 20 years after that
Yeah.
recital on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, where one person drew a crowd of like tens of thousands of people. I mean, I feel like any classical music organization today would be salivating for those kind of ticket sales and that kind of draw. You know, just on a base level. Like
Exactly.
you have to be extraordinarily racist to deny yourself just the pure capitalistic gain that you could possibly,
I mean,
do you know what I mean? Just to be crass about it for 1 second. It's
crowds of 4,000 people, 4,000 people for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and months. She had contract,
yeah.
but they still said no. I just think it's just the craziest thing, you know, ever. And so this thing about having your song be heard, it is so imperative and so important right now, especially after everything that this country has gone through and is still now experiencing. I think more than ever, it's so important for us to hear about from Karim, to hear about his feelings, about his background, and Nick Pond, with how important it is to have a collaborative artist, you know, program, and so that we can hear the works of fantastic women, female composers, and hear these neglected, voices. Like we need to hear that.
It's interesting because what's different now is that the recital has been sort of relegated off to the side. When these singers were blazing trails, the recital was kind of it was one of the more important and kind of worshipped, platforms for classical music. And now we only think sort of bigger is better. And I mourn that the recital isn't valued in the same way by.
We're gonna bring it back.
Well, that's why we're here, right? That's the goal. That's what we're trying to do. But also, it's part of what that says to me, right, is that the individual artist was valued in a somewhat different way. Because as we've been saying through this whole conversation, regardless of race, a recital is the place where the artist gets to tell their individual story through music. It's where we get to be ourselves. We're not hiding in some sort of costume. There is no fourth wall. We're not wearing wigs. We're not wearing, or maybe you are wearing a wig. I don't know. But you're not in costume is the point. And it's just you. And it's a chance to bare your soul and show your artistry and through that you show your artistic mettle. And, if we're just valuing large institutions and large corporate art making, what are we losing? And so
we're losing individuality. We're losing the importance of art making. Like, if there are no recitals, then there are then we don't have no need for composers to compose music. Then we have no need for what they have to say, And let's face it, some of our voices are better suited for these type of things, which are recitals and oratorio. Some of our voices are just better suited for it than to be singing in a cavernous 3,000, 4,000 seat house. You know what I mean? Like it singing, Italian or French rap or whatever. Some of our voices are better set or better used, I'd say, for this. And the funny thing is, when you really think about it, there are a lot of people who say, well, if there are a couple of songs that you could have or a piece of music that you'd like to have, if it were your last thing that you listen to. For certain people, it might be Puccini. For certain people, it might be Verdi. For certain people, it might be Tchaikovsky or Rachmaninoff. But for me, it would have to be Strauss for last songs for me. That for me speaks to my soul and to my spirit a little bit easier, more delicate than certain operatic pieces. I have to be honest, and I love opera, but for me, I think that's a home. It feels like home.
What about you, Karim?
I think we've been trained in a way, like when we were coming up through school, and I don't know what schools are like now, but I don't think that they're that much different. I think that we were trained to be a certain way, and we were not necessarily encouraged to be the individuals that we were. If I'm just going to speak, let me just speak from my experience anyway. I think that because I always approached music from my point of view and not from other people's point of view, I think that put a lot of our educators off. It put a lot of people, I think people lack imagination sometimes, or it jars them in a way that they say, well, I don't know what to do with that.
Yes.
That's not what I'm used to. So I'm not going to deal with that person. I'm not going to deal with Karim because I don't get it. Or, whatever it was. I'm not going to get into the brains of other people and why I wasn't given certain opportunities, this, that, and the other, and all that. But we're fine. So we're doing fine. But I think part of what was going on is that individuality wasn't necessarily the focus when we were coming up through school. It was like, do your 5 arias, get to all your languages, do all these different styles. And that's not how a lot of singers, musicians in general, violinists too, that's just not how, you know, we're built. We're not built to do everything across the board as well as the other thing. Some of us excel at very specific things. I think like finally for me, when I finally was just like courageous enough to say like, this is what I do well. It's this, 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 and this. I'm not going to do the other stuff anymore. And I'm not going to worry about the other stuff anymore. I think was when something took a turn. And for me, one of those things is song. So I would encourage everybody to just kind of find those things, like, I don't, you know, find the things that we do well, you know, find the things that we really love.
Well, in the moment where we are right now as a business, you better find it fast, because unless you're being asked, you know, who knows what this lockdown and all that stuff will mean for us in terms of flying overseas and still working and doing things of that nature. If the rest of the country, the rest of the world is beginning to shut down, then I think that's probably going to happen with us soon, or maybe not, who knows. But we need to become a little bit more, I'm sorry, I'm at a loss for words because it's been a couple of hours, but we need to be a little bit more open, I should say, to the possibilities of art song and of recital making and music making in that way, because everything is going to be much, 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 much smaller, much, much more intimate. That means that our communication skills and what we're serving as artists need to be as honest and as real as possible, because there is no hiding. Like, there is no set and no scenery to hide behind. You must deliver in a very, very honest way. And I want nothing more than to do that now. Like, I'm so excited, to be able to present in this way, because this actually shows people who I am, but it also introduces the audience to maybe composers and to music that they probably have never heard of before, to stories that they've never heard of before. And so right now we need to be galvanized and to find our all of our energy now to get as much information out there as possible. So
it's interesting that you say that, because a question I've been getting asked a lot is sort of like, how can, from students, has been, how as artists can we engage as, feed our activism into our art?
Yeah.
And how do we do that without kind of, killing our artistic career and through protest? And, one of the ways you can do it is by programming a recital, right? I mean, that's the thing. This art form, because it's so personalized, it allows you the power to really make a statement. I mean, your open space recital for open space music, what was it, 2 weeks ago, last week?
Yeah, it was last weekend. Yeah.
You really wanted to make a statement, and you did so with the songs that you chose to program, and it was beautiful.
Thank you.
And, there's something empowering in this moment, because, just simply due to like the limitations of the moment, recital is sort of one of the few things that is possible.
Certainly. Karim, how are you feeling now about making music in this sort of milieu, which you've been doing like most of your career anyway? So how are you feeling about it?
Yeah, I've always, to piggyback on Nick and what you're saying, and talking about activism and making statements, I think it's like, I honestly think like it's always been our job as artists to speak to the moment and to speak to things that are going on. And I feel like that's how you make classical music relevant and make it universal, not the idea that it's universal like just for lip service, but you actually make it universal by making it relatable to things that are going on in the world. And I think like I've always tried to do that with my programming. I've tried to do that just in life is to kind of mix both my personal life and the world around me and my professional life. And I feel like that's how you create new audiences. It's how you make this music matter, I think. You know, it's not treating it like a museum piece. It's treating it like part of the dialogue. And like, you know, so I'm excited about seeing what people do, honestly. Because I think that there are some really brilliant artistic minds in our community that haven't been challenged yet because they've just done whatever they've been hired to do. And this is going to be a moment for them, hopefully, to step up and become an individual artist and so I'm excited about seeing that. And if it doesn't happen, we're still here to do it too. So there, you know.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. That's absolutely right. Nick, how are you feeling about how we're to proceed now, especially with so many stories to tell? How are you feeling about that?
You know, I feel similarly. I mean, obviously, you both know that I feel the same way as Karim in terms of like needing to kind of tie what we do as much as we can to the present moment in whatever way possible. This moment, though, has been really liberating. You know, and maybe it's just because like I'm a good Midwestern boy from Ann Arbor, but like there's something about me that kind of gets concerned a lot. Like my first instinct is always dealing with, or sorry, the first hurdle I have to deal with is like dealing with the shoulds, like looking for the permission to be able to sing something or to do something. And, you know, that's been something that while I feel like I've successfully pushed past that hurdle many times in my career, in my life, it's way easier now than it has ever been. Because I'm just sort of like, the canon is a myth and these expectations are invented. And, you know, I'm seeing that in like really sharp relief now and in full technicolor in ways that I don't think I was able to previously. And so, you know, for me personally, I just feel kind of liberated. And so, you know, I just have to keep doing more of what we all are already doing. And yeah, like Karim, I'm really excited to see what other people will start to come up with. It's really great to see people's minds starting to engage in a different way and, you know, tie the world around us to, you know, the ivory tower in which we think we dwell, you know?
For sure. For sure.
So I'm just going to check and see if Facebook has any more questions. I don't think that I see any. Stephanie Tennell. Oh my gosh, blast from the past.
Hey.
She says, hello, my beautiful friends. My heart is full seeing the three of you beautiful humans on the same screen. Wow.
Aww.
Well, now my heart is full. Gosh. For those of you who don't know on Facebook, the three of us have known each other a very long time.
Don't say hello.
Do you guys have any final thoughts for us to take us out and wrap us up? Anything you want to add or?
I have to say that I'm so grateful for the women and men who came before us, who said, to hell with it, I'm going to do it anyway. And just so, I am, even when I think about them and when I think about what they endured and when I think about how much they had to deal with versus what we have to deal with in this present day, it just gives me, it should give us all pause and more energy and more strength to pursue what it is that we know is right. And when you really, really think about it, it didn't have to be that way. But I realized that there was maybe 2 or 3 crazy people who said yes. And it was those people who said yes to that crazy idea that allowed for a public and for us to learn from the courageousness of those artists. And so for me, I think about them and I think about everything that they endured in a time when it really was incredible that they did that. And I think about the time that we are in right now, and I feel like, honestly, there are infinite possibilities for us. So Yeah.
I love
Kareem.
that.
Yeah. Think about it. What?
I mean, it's true. I mean, like we, the three of us would not be doing what we do if it weren't for them.
Yeah.
Very-
Straight up. Like it would not.
Oh no.
There would be no us.
Yeah.
Truly. You know, there would be no us. You need to look into Francisco Araiza because I think that he has an interesting background.
What do you mean, ethnically?
Yes.
Okay, I'll look into him.
Yeah. I think so. Yeah. I think I was reading that somewhere. So that's something for me to look into as well.
I'm gonna look into it. Maybe I misspoke. I thought he was just straight up Mexican.
No, I don't think so.
Oh shit. Okay.
Yeah, maybe. It's all good.
Oh my God, the FCC is going to fine us. So I cannot thank the two of you enough for engaging in this conversation today. I adore you both, and I'm so grateful that you would join us for this. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So next week we're off because, you know, it's Thanksgiving and
It's gobble gobble.
apparently gobble gobble. Everybody's going to gobble gobble in isolation, and it's very sad. But we wish everybody the happiest of Thanksgivings if you're celebrating American Thanksgiving next week. And the week after, we'll be back with Karim to discuss his program, which is going to stream the following weekend, starting December 4th through the 6th. It's an all Schubert program, and I can't wait for all of you to hear it. So thank you so much, everybody on Facebook, for joining us today, and we'll see you in a couple weeks. In the meantime, take very good care, and thank you both so much.
Thank you. Love you and love you both. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Bye-bye.
Happy Thanksgiving. Love you both. Bye, Facebook.
Bye.